We have Rosemarie Crawford with us here. She's a VFHS board member and co-founder of the National Kitten Coalition. And she's going to tell us a little about herself and talk to us about kitten season.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Let me just see here real quick. I'm going to turn my camera on for a minute just to say hi. And then there we go. Hi, everyone. So you have a face to go with this voice that you're going to hear. I'm looking over on my second monitor to see other folks here. Thanks so much for joining tonight. Tiny little bit about myself. There's more information on our website at kitten-coalition.org. I'm happy to present today. I'm happy and honored to be a board member of the Virginia Federation of Humane Societies. I'm co-founder of the National Kitten Coalition. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a little bit. I've been in animal welfare for about 25 years in different roles, working in 2 different shelters, in the medical staff on a shelter, as foster coordinator at 2 shelters. And currently I am, like I said, with the National Kitten Coalition, and that takes the majority of my time and efforts. I do also work in a veterinary clinic, a private veterinary practice nearby here. And yeah, so we have lots of experience. I'm hoping that some of the things that I've learned over the past 25 years and as foster coordinating, especially as kitten season is coming and being in throes of kitten season, that you'll be able to take lots of suggestions away from this today. And we can kind of make it a little bit interactive. So I'll kind of try to watch the chat box for ideas and things that are coming up or comments that you're making or questions that you're having. We probably won't need the full hour and a half for today's session, because the other thing that I'll be mentioning during the session is that, again, at our website, kitten-coalition.org, we have a bunch of information and a whole bunch of webinars that you can watch on demand. You can have your foster parents go there, you can have your staff go there. And so I won't repeat a lot of those kind of things that we have totally separate webinars about. And I'll try to give you kind of the bigger picture that hopefully will be the most help for your kitten seasons coming. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off my camera here and give the slides the full attention. Okay. So hi, everyone. All righty. So a little bit about the National Kitten Coalition. If you'd like to put in the chat, if you know about us already, if you've attended any of our webinars, please feel free to do so. You guys can participate as much or as little as you like in these sessions, but it's sometimes nice to know and to be able to kind of have this a little bit more conversational. For those of you who are not yet familiar, we are a nonprofit organization. We were founded over 20 years ago, actually, before taking care of kittens was a thing in shelters, before many shelters even had foster programs. And that's part of why we got started, is because many of the shelters were simply euthanizing bottle baby kittens, kittens who were too young for adoption, but otherwise healthy, but had no place on the adoption floor available. Kittens who had upper respiratory infection or diarrhea, they were being euthanized instead of being sent to foster. So we started working with local shelters and rescues and trying to help them get foster programs going, and then training their fosters to not just take care of bottle babies, but that kind of grew into its own life. And people, of course, those bottle babies had diarrhea, or they had upper respiratory, or they had other things going on. And so people would start asking about, well, how do I take care of diarrhea? How do I do upper respiratory? What about panleukopenia? What about fading kitten syndrome? And as the years went on, it grew into the National Kitten Coalition that you see today. Our mission is an education mission. We are here to increase kitten survival rates and transform their lives through the power of education. So we, as an organization, don't take in or adopt out animals as an organization, but individually, our members foster for their local shelters and rescues. We work in veterinary clinics, we work in shelters. We have lots of hands-on with kittens of all ages and all conditions. So what we try to do is to prevent everyone else from having to reinvent the wheel or to learn from hard lessons. You know, we don't have to learn from mistakes. If someone's made them originally, or if someone has already learned from something, let's learn from those people, so that we don't have to make those learning mistakes. So we provide webinars and on-site workshops. As I mentioned, we have a lot of webinars in our e-learning center. They are all free to access on demand when you feel like learning something new. We do sessions at conferences. We also present conferences. We have our online kitten conference that happens in June every year, and we have our veterinary conference that happens in October every year. Those are both online. We have all kinds of educational materials on our website. We have over 200 articles and fast fact sheets, information sheets, things that you can print out, you can download them, you can put them on your walls at the shelters and rescues that you're at, or in your own home, in your foster rooms. The e-learning center has the certificate programs. There will be many more of those being added. We are AAVSB approved for Race Continuing Ed. That's the American Association of Veterinary State Boards, to provide continuing education for the veterinary community. So we take our information very seriously, and we make sure that things are well researched and put as much as possible of the current information out there. We try very hard to stay current on things. I'm happy to say that now kitten research is actually happening. 20 years ago, it was barely a thing. And now there's so much research happening, and even specific to kittens with medications and behavior and development, and all kinds of wonderful things happening at research universities, that we're learning a lot about kittens, and things are coming out very quickly over the months, lots of new stuff every year. So we try very hard to keep up with the latest so that you guys, so we can bring that to you and you have the latest as well. We're not going to get into a lot of medical on this one, but it is for informational purposes only. A little disclaimer: prescription medications. How many of you don't have to answer it in the chat box, but if you want to, there's that drawer of leftover medications from other fosters or other animals. We do want to make a point that prescription meds really should only be used under the direction of a veterinarian. Some medications that might be right for one kitten with an upper respiratory infection might be very wrong for another kitten with what might seem to be the same kind of upper respiratory infection, but there might be something different going on. So always make sure, even if it is still a medication that hasn't expired yet and you know it stayed sterile, still check with your veterinarian about if that's going to be the right medication for that kitten in that circumstance. We cannot say enough about establishing veterinary relationships with your local veterinarian or your veterinarian, obviously, if you've got one on staff. How many have a contracted veterinarian, either in the building on staff or that you contract out to, that you can bring kittens to, or your fosters can bring kittens to? Again, if you want to include information in the chat, that'd be great, but you don't have to. In any case, make sure the time you spend developing a good working relationship with a veterinarian, especially if you don't have one on staff or on contract, it's going to pay off in the long run. To be able to have a really strong relationship where your veterinarian also knows that you know what you're talking about, and that you can have a conversation with them, maybe even over the phone, once you have a really good relationship started, and get some advice and get some help for some of the kittens in your care and the other animals in your care, without maybe necessarily having to go in with that patient. Be aware, though, veterinarians do have rules and regulations that they have to follow, meaning a client and a patient relationship. So when they say they need to see a kitten for a certain thing, it might be because of that, or it might be because it could be a lot of different things going on, and they really do need to see specific to that animal, where where a video maybe isn't enough and they really have to put hands on the kitten and maybe run some diagnostics. Oh, I'm glad to see. So great relationship. We have vets on staff, great relationship with local vets, veterinary team on staff. That is so encouraging to see. Again, that is something that rarely existed 20 years ago when we started, and I'm so glad we have shelter medicine now. We have all of you guys are who've replied here that you have veterinarians on staff and great relationships with your veterinarians. That is so encouraging. It really truly is a lifesaver, as you all probably know. All right, so what are we going to talk about today and in general? So if you've attended any of our previous workshops, if either in person or some of our webinars, you know there are certain things that we kind of bring up regardless of the topic of the day or the age of the kitten. And these are some of the most life-saving, impactful things that you can do in your programs. Number one, weighing kittens daily. For foster parents, weighing kittens daily. If you can get it into your budget now, I know a lot of budgets maybe were decided on last year and you might have to wait a year, or maybe you do a special fundraiser, or your friends of group, friends of the shelter can maybe help with this. Being able to send home a small digital scale with every foster parent who's taking kittens. These could be like the postage scales. They could be the little kitchen scales for weighing food. This is a lifesaver. Kittens should gain weight every single day. And the only way we're going to know that is if we're weighing them every single day. And with kittens, sometimes the lack of weight gain, or certainly weight loss, is sometimes the first sign, and it's often the only sign outwardly that we can see going on with the kittens, telling us that something isn't going right with these kittens. So weighing kittens daily is what's going to be able to help your fosters, help your whole staff be able to recognize those illnesses early, as my second point there is, and to provide that proactive treatment. Kittens don't have the glycogen stores for energy. They don't have fat stores. They are growing and developing at a very fast rate. We can't wait a day or two with kittens, especially little bottle babies and the younger kittens. We can't wait a day or two like we might do with our older cats going, oh, well, they kind of threw up today, but I'll see if they're feeling better tomorrow. Or I'll make an appointment for 2 days from now. Kittens don't have that kind of time, especially the young ones. So catching that weight loss or the lack of weight gain is going to be the first thing. So get the scales if you can, or put it in the budget, like I said, for next year, or get someone a special fundraising going. Working in cooperation with veterinarians, it looks like a lot of you are already doing that. That is wonderful. Disease prevention. So vaccination is huge. I hope, again, if you want to participate, are you doing vaccination when age appropriate on intake? Not a day later, not 4 hours later, but on intake. There are plenty of studies that show the longer that an animal, and kittens in this case, are in a shelter before being vaccinated, the further into the shelter they go, the greater their chances are of catching something contagious. No matter how good we are in shelters about cleaning and providing the best sanitation we can, just the nature of a shelter where we have animals coming in every day, possibly bringing something in with them. We'll talk more about sanitation in a little bit, and reducing stress to keep kittens healthy. We are finally learning much more about the stress of animals and of people, and what that stress, especially chronic stress, does to our health. And it's the same for kittens and cats and dogs. So whatever we can do for that environmental enrichment, for the muffling of sound, for comfort within their housing area, those all are very important for keeping them healthy. Alrighty. I didn't put this as a poll question that you would actually answer on the poll, but if you want to put A, B, C, D, or E, so you don't have to type a whole bunch about who's here. Are you rescue or shelter administration? The executive directors, the ones making the budget, deciding the budget. Are you on the staff? Like the foster coordinators or the foster managers or the care staff? Are you a foster parent? Or a member of the veterinary staff? Or something else? And some of you might be many of these. The way the way we tend to wear multiple hats when in shelters. Good, I'm seeing A's, B's, C's, more B's. All of the above, yes. Excellent. A and C. C's, E's. Um, okay, so we've got a good mix here. Uh, I will try to remember everyone that's here and provide specific ideas for each of these different areas. And this is also where if you'd like to participate and add in an idea when we're talking about some of these things, something that's worked for you, or a question or a concern that maybe someone else will be able to chime in and help out with. All right, so let's move along here. So these are the things we're going to look at, again, trying to reach everyone who's here today and provide some useful information and hints and tips that you can bring into this year's kitten season. So administrative level and then the foster programming level, kitten care supplies, essential kitten care knowledge, and a preview of adoptions. All right, so those of you who get to decide the budget, some budgeting things, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on any individual one of these, but hopefully to give you some ideas. The medical budget, I put this up here first. I'm glad to see so many people have veterinary contracts already. If you're working with your veterinarians, are there certain medical supplies, much less medications, that your veterinarian feels comfortable with you having access to as kind of a shelter supply? Is there a person who's going to be able to be that person? Oops, if you don't have, sorry. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Let's get back here. There we go. Sorry about that. If the veterinarian isn't actually in the shelter, what arrangements do you have with your contracted veterinarian to be able to have or use medications? And the other reason I also put food on here. One of the things that we find when we talk with shelters and admin staff, and especially shelters who want to either create a foster program for especially bottle babies or expand their foster program to include more kittens or to include those bottle babies, is that we often hear that a bottle baby program is too expensive to implement. And then when we talk with them further, we often find out that the medical for all of the other animals in the shelter and the food for all of the other animals in the shelter is looped all together, but then separate for the bottle babies. And when they look at their medical budget or they allocate their budget for food and medical the same way they do for all of the other animals in the shelter, and the cost per meal type of thing for like the KMR, the milk replacement for kittens, versus kibble that the older animals are getting, that they find that really the bottle baby programs are not more expensive than than caring for other animals, especially if you've got a good foster program going as well. And the goodwill that it brings in your community to say, you know what, we're helping these animals too. We're able to take care of these animals and not have them have to be euthanized. You get a lot of goodwill from your community, and often a lot of the items that you need for a foster program, and that milk replacer and all of those additional supplies, oftentimes your community will step up and provide either the donations or the actual items themselves. For example, if you do a kitten shower, you can often ask for the supplies that you need for your bottle baby program to help more kittens that following year. On to staffing. Volunteer assistance. I'm a big believer in how much good volunteers can do. And I think that maybe we don't use volunteers enough. If you've got those volunteers who like they've been with you a while, they are quality people, they do a great job. you might want to think about pulling some of them in as, a more permanent kind of a situation. And I'll talk more about how volunteer assistance can help with your foster program in just a little bit. And then kind of taking a look at assets and inventory before we get into this kitten season. How many of you are already seeing kittens coming in? Bottle babies, pregnant moms, are you seeing them already? We're here, I'm up in Northern Virginia. We are seeing some babies already. And usually by the time the end of February is here, we're for sure seeing some. So before it gets any worse, what kind of space, if you're thinking we need a space that's safe for kittens, even if it's a temporary thing until a foster parent can come and get them, or maybe it's a space for a temporary nursery if you're going to try something like that, what kind of space do you have for animals? And can you maybe take some of that space to be specific for kittens? To the nursery programs, when we help shelters get nursery programs going, one of the things that comes up is we just don't have any place for a nursery and we can't build a nursery. And we have lots of examples of organizations that found like they took a locker room that wasn't being used. They took the shower area that wasn't being used. They took a storage closet that just became a place to dump stuff, and they cleaned it out, and it actually was used as a kitten nursery or some other type of kitten program, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So where are those unused corners of your shelter? Do you want to use them for something specific to kittens? Are you thinking about expanding a foster program or starting it? And then the other thing specific to kittens is when kittens are coming back from foster, if you already have those foster programs, do you juggle with, I've got 8 kittens in foster ready to come back for adoption, but we have no space in the shelter to house them? Um, and if that's something that's happened in the past for you guys, maybe this is the time where you can take that idea and go, okay, well, how can we mitigate this for the future? And one idea that's been very successful in a lot of shelters is simply having 2 cages, pick whatever number depending on the amount of space you have in your shelter overall, or if you have community rooms versus everyone being in a cage. What's your situation, and can you carve out some percentage of space that is dedicated for kittens? So as the foster coordinator, okay, I've got 4 kittens out there that need to come back from these 2 different fosters, but yes, I have my 2 dedicated cages. And the kittens, as you probably know, get adopted out pretty quickly when we have them. I guess also depending on where you're at, but those cages often turn over quicker than some of the other cages, and having those available is really a game changer. So a few things about intake. Who's ever on your intake desk, that's a really, really important position. Every single part in a shelter and rescue is an important position. And if we can find out a little bit more, if you're not already asking some of these questions, maybe think about adding them to this year's kitten season list. Asking, of course, where the animal is found, both the general and the specific. Well, they were found at a park. Okay, which park, where at? They were found by the PetSmart. Okay, where at by the PetSmart? Were they in the dumpster? Were they in the gully? Were they, on the hot pavement? What were the environmental conditions like? Because sometimes animals come in and we don't get all the information. Maybe they had been out in 100-degree weather on hot pavement and we didn't know that. And when they're starting to decline a day later and systems are shutting down, that explains why. And if we know some of these things ahead of time, we could maybe mitigate some of them or even prevent them if we know more about the specific conditions when they were out there. And then also, when were they found? Oftentimes we'd have people come in and, I found these kittens, and it turns out they found the kittens like 2 weeks ago, or they found them 3 days ago, and maybe they were plump 3 days ago and they were being well cared for by their mama cat. But unfortunately, people thought that they were abandoned, and that's a whole other webinar about getting the word out to communities not to kidnap kittens. But sometimes people find them, they mean well, and they're taking care of them as best they can, but they're realizing after a few days are going by that the kittens aren't thriving anymore and they're not looking plump and good anymore, and that's when they decide to come to the shelter. So, when they were found, and then what has been done with those kittens. So where have they been housed? Sometimes, and it's not the fault of people out there, most people don't realize that kittens can't regulate their body temperature until they're about 4 or 5 weeks old. And so if they're a very young kitten and they haven't had a heat support, that's going to affect how they're doing. Also, what's been fed, I can't tell you how many strange things. My best, it's really not terrible, but one that sticks out in my mind is there was this weird white crusty stuff on the kittens. We're like, what is this? We're trying to figure it out, and it turns out the person had been feeding them pancake mix because they didn't know what to feed them. Um, and so, like, what's been fed? Where have they been housed? What kind, have they had a heat support, especially for those young ones, and kind of just find out what's been happening. Because the other thing, often, and you've probably seen it too, people think, oh, it's a kitten, let's give it some milk or some cream. And if we know that on intake, then the next day when the kitten is having blowout diarrhea, we're like, yeah, because the person gave it a bowl full of cream and it's affecting their digestive system. So we don't have to panic like, oh my God, what's wrong with this kitten? We know what's wrong with the kitten, and we can also take steps to mitigate that. Again, when they come in, doing an immediate exam, and this doesn't necessarily have to be with a vet tech or with a veterinarian. Someone who's trained at least to do a quick exam. I'm talking about like the 30-second exam, looking at them, are they plump? Are they relatively healthy? Are we noticing any wounds? Are we noticing, are they emaciated? The really quick look for obvious things and to age them so we know, are they ready for the vaccines and the antiparasitics? And if they are, let's get them in them immediately before they even go to their regular housing where they're going to stay in the shelter, or even before their foster parent comes to pick them up. Probiotics, I cannot say enough good things about. Um, there's things like Fortiflora or ProViable. We know, and we're learning more all the time about the benefit of probiotics and the support that it gives, like every part of the body, not just if they're having diarrhea or to prevent them from having diarrhea, but we know that probiotics work and within the gut to affect many of our body systems and the kitten's body systems. Um, from immunity and even neurologic. So getting probiotics started right away, and especially during transition periods. It might be too expensive to keep them on it full time at the shelter, uh, but for intake, for changes of foster, like to, going to a new home, including going to their adoptive home, send those probiotics with the kitten. They make a world of difference. Someone's asking about the recommended ones. We, as a education organization, don't recommend certain ones over other ones, but we can tell you ones that we've heard very good results, or we've seen those results ourselves, and that's things like Fortiflora or ProViable are both very highly rated. When the kittens are in your shelter, even if they're waiting to go to foster, um, we need to protect them. So that means they should be in a place that is free, or as free as possible, of disease. Um, Oftentimes I see them being put in isolation, but it's isolation unit where there has been terrible disease like panleukopenia kittens. That's the last place we want to put unvaccinated or very young kittens. Um, so someplace that is really clean. It might be someone's office where animals do not come and go. The kittens remain in their carrier. They're not taken out and passed around and, oh, let me hold the kitten and let me pet the kitten and running on the floor. They're in their carrier, they're safe, there's a towel over the carrier, you could check on them, lift up the towel, make sure they're still doing okay. um, And of course, if they need a heat source, you've got that in the carrier, only on part of the carrier, so they can get off of that heat source also. But keep them as free and as safe and away from potential pathogens as possible. Uh, and the initial meals, when they come into the shelter, especially if they are a little bit emaciated or if their condition is unknown, it's not like they're coming back from foster care where you know what the fosters have been doing. Let's not make that first meal too big, and let's not make that first meal too rich. So if they're taking a milk replacer, we're going to dilute it a little bit, and we talk more about that in other webinars. If they're old enough to eat wet food, let's give them like the chicken and rice, not the super rich stuff right off the bat, and let's do small amounts more frequently than one big amount that they might gorge themselves on and end up either throwing up or having diarrhea from it. So let's look a little bit now at the foster program part of this and the planning that you can do. Now is the time before things get any crazier that we look at our applications, to our foster application and our agreements with the volunteers. Was there anything during last year or that seems to come up that you're like, oh, this drives me crazy. They ask me that all the time. Or, if we only knew that person did this, this, or that. Is there something that those kind of things that are coming up, can they be included in your application or in your agreement with your volunteers? So that you don't have to keep answering the same question over and over again, or that you don't have to ask the same question over and over again, or state some information that might be like common knowledge to you and your staff, but not necessarily to a new foster. And go ahead and tweak those now before it gets crazy. The specific to the foster animals, health checks, vaccines, parasite control. Does your shelter rescue send those, like the dewormers? Do you send them home? Do you have appointments where they have to come in? Are managing those appointments, if you have your veterinarian and your vet staff in the shelter there, are managing those appointments problematic? Is there an easier, a better way that you can do it? Would a whiteboard be helpful? Would a certain centralized scheduling be more helpful, that where maybe you know, it's accessible from the foster parents at home, they can sign up for their appointment time? I could tell you from the medical side of things, it goes much better if we know ahead of time what our appointments are. We, of course, are always having animals coming into the shelter who need to be seen, and there's always animals currently in the shelter or rescue or foster program that are going to have some kind of an emergency. We can't always account for that part, which is why it's that much more important to have these regular health checks well planned, and on the schedules, and the foster knows about being there on time, and the vet clinic or the vet staff knows who's going to be coming in at what time. Even if it's how the animals get from the front door to the vet staff, if there's something that's, you know, been a little bit challenging, can we figure out a way now before we get into this season to smooth some of that out? So any of your issues from last year, any of your repeated questions or the questions you get or have to ask, one of the things that often comes up is foster animals who are introduced properly or improperly to animals within the household already. So do you have very clearly stated in your foster agreement about keeping those foster kittens separate from other animals in the house, owned animals or other groups of kittens, other foster kittens? If not, I would strongly suggest that we don't let them socialize with each other at least. And you guys all have to make your own decisions on this and your own policies. And this is again where it's also good to work with your veterinarian, but at least until vaccines are in place and antiparasitics have been used, and we can know that the risk of cross-contamination or cross having them exposed to either parasites or diseases has been minimized with these vaccines and antiparasitics. We hear stories every year about someone whose dog or cat at home got worms or got ear mites or vice versa, um, or fleas. And the the foster wants the shelter to pay for the flea treatment for the dogs. If you have clearly in your documents that they should not um, mix and mingle with each other, and that you are not responsible for the health of their animals, if the foster parents doesn't agree with that and lets them be introduced to each other without your approval, that kind of can maybe help mitigate that situation if that's something that's happening in your current situation. Like I said, we hear about these kind of things frequently. The other thing, sadly, that we hear about is, oh, my dog is really friendly and um but he picked up the kitten and the kitten got an injury or worse. They're very fragile. There's even a situation where a kitten was putting its paw outside of its carrier, and the dog, not knowing its own strength, ended up injuring that paw so badly that it had to be amputated. So we never want those kind of things, of course, to happen. So prevent some of that before it ever becomes an issue. And then, of course, have a system in place for tracking all of your fosters, your animals, and your supplies. And I'll talk about supplies in just a bit. So let's look at your foster caregivers. How many people, sorry, I keep meaning to answer this. How young can we start probiotics? Pretty much immediately. The worst, uh, so what's not used by the intestinal system, by the GI system is going to be pooped out. You don't want to waste your money, but certainly uh, you can start probiotics right away at any age. And in fact, if you have bottle baby kittens, one of the myths out there is if they have gray or white poop, that it's from the milk replacer formula. It is not. If it were clumping and stuff, perhaps, but gray stool or worse, white stool is a very, very serious situation in bottle baby kittens. Um, and you have to get those probiotics into them as fast as you can at that point. And again, we have other webinars on care for bottle baby kittens. The gut flora in those situations is terribly off. And if it's off, the kitten isn't going to be able to digest things or absorb things properly, the nutrients in the intestines. And it is actually a life-threatening situation to have that very, very gray or white poop coming out of them. So use the probiotics, have them on hand. And yes, you can start them if someone brings in an orphaned kitten who is literally just hours or days old, you can actually start putting some of the probiotics in with either a syringe or um, with some of the KMR. I'm sorry, I say KMR, meaning kitten milk replacer. There are other products with different names that are also kitten milk formulas. So I'm not saying just KMR over another brand. So your current, sorry, that went down a little rabbit hole on the probiotics, but let's look at the fosters. How many of you, again, participate if you feel like it, have all the fosters you need and it's great. And in fact, you don't have enough animals for fosters. I'm gonna guess that most of us still need fosters for whatever reason. Sometimes people's lives change, they get a new job, they have to move away. We lose fosters all the time, and it's not necessarily because they don't like what they're doing or they don't like our program. It's because life happens. So our foster caregivers who we currently have, they might have fostered 5 litters for you last summer. They are great. Now's the time to check in with them, just make sure they're still available. You don't want to have a set of kittens who you desperately need to place and have to spend time with calling fosters who are like, oh yeah, I didn't want to foster this year, I'm not going to be fostering. So find out their current status. That will also help you determine how many more fosters you need to find based on how many kittens you had last year and how many fosters this year are saying, yeah, they're coming back, they're ready to foster, bring them on. Recruiting is a nonstop, ever ongoing process. We really need to recruit during the entire year, not just right before kitten season. But since we're heading into kitten season, we'll talk a little bit more about recruiting and then, of course, retaining the ones we get, keeping them happy with the program. And again, we're going to lose some all the time. Hopefully, it's just because of other reasons and not that they don't like the shelter, the rescue, the fostering, whatever those situations are. There are many other ways that volunteers can help in a foster program without being foster parents. And I want to talk about a little bit of that in the upcoming slides. And then, of course, our supplies and our inventory. Um, the bigger your foster program gets, the more snuggle safes and heat discs you have, and the more supplies that you send home to fosters, the more you're going to start to really need to track your supplies. I don't think anyone ever intends to steal the supplies. There's just so many going out the door, and fosters who might foster one time and they might think they're going to foster again and they still have the supplies at home. But in the meantime, you really need extra supplies, and they're sitting in a house that doesn't have kittens currently. We'll talk about that as well. Um, so your current foster caregivers, check base, like I said, touch base with them, see if they're still willing to foster this year. Do they have differences? Do they, have they been toying with, yeah, maybe this year I'll be brave enough to take the bottle babies. Maybe this year I'll do the training for the bottle babies and I'll try that. Do they want to, I mean, I've had fosters who are like, I was happy to do it, but we had 3 litters of black kittens last year, and I got nothing against black kittens, but maybe if we can have some other kinds of other colors of kittens. That literally was truly a thing, and I get it. So even things that, to me, I don't care what colors the kittens are. I just want to know what their age and their health status, and send them on. Uh, but you never know what someone might prefer. They might prefer just 2 kittens. They might prefer the single kitten. They might prefer, 4 kittens. Some people, especially if it's hard for them to give up a kitten, it's easier for them sometimes if they foster the litter of 3 rather than the litter of 1 or 2. Because if they're like, well, there's this one, but I like that one too. And it's sometimes easier just to say, okay, you know what? I can't have all 3 of them. So all 3 of them are going back, and I'm going to take the next litter of kittens. So sometimes not having that singleton, if it's easier for them to say goodbye because it's a whole litter. All kinds of things that I can't even imagine. What are their preferences for this year? Different ages, different types of conditions. Then this is a point, reaching your fosters for current kittens. How many of, again, put it out there if you want, but you don't have to. Put out, we've got a litter of 4 kittens that came in, they're 5 weeks old, who can take them? And it goes out in the social media page. And the people who live on social media are the ones who are always getting the kittens. It is not uncommon for us to hear from shelters and from fosters themselves that, man, I would foster. I never get a chance to foster because someone else is on social media and they get them instantly, and I don't even have a chance. So I would encourage you, because a lot of jobs out there that your fosters have are jobs that they can't be tied to they can't have their phone with them. But they are excellent fosters and truly want to foster, but because of how the contacting is done, they kind of miss out. So if there's fosters out there, maybe as the foster coordinator, every now and then you go, you know what, this litter would be perfect for that person. I'm going to directly email that person. The kittens are stable. I understand that person might not get this message for an hour or 2, but I'm going to let them have, first chance at this group of kittens. Kind of just being aware of that thing that, and not everyone is able to have their phone or be on social media, but truly they do want to help. Okay, and then are there any new or changed expectations uh, for your organization for the way you're going to run the foster program? Are you going to require certain trainings this year or certain trainings in order to foster a different kind of kitten? Are there meetings that they have to attend either in person or online about shelter policies or foster program policies? Do you want to do social events? Some foster programs are really big on the social events and getting together for pizza or doing a picnic in the summertime or and others, and certain fosters would like that, and others are like, no, I'm just happy to do my thing. I don't really need the social interaction, but a lot of people really like the social interaction. So, are you going to add those kind of things in? And we'll talk more about doing some of that. Um, Alexis, thank you. There's a note about Purina, feline probiotic pet food supplement for cats of all life stages to help support intestinal health and balance. Sounds good. There's also a food that's a GI biome. It's a prescription food, but you can get it from your veterinarians. That is also really nice, and people have had good results with. To that point, I know there's the talk of AD versus ID, those prescription foods. And while AD is very tasty and palatable, ID is going to um, also still be palatable, not quite as rich, and tends to not produce as much diarrhea or upset. It's a very highly digestible food, and it is appropriate for all life stages. It is a growth diet. Okay, let's move on. So your foster programming, how many new recruits do you need? Again, it's an ongoing process. Lots of ways. I'd love to get some ideas from all of you too about what ways work for you to find new fosters. Certainly, I want to emphasize the community outreach aspect of it and also within your own shelter or rescue. So let me start with the shelter or rescue part first. I bet you probably have people coming in to see the cats and kittens, thinking about adopting, but they leave without a cat or a kitten. Do you have signs in your lobby about help foster kittens? Um, is it on your website about fostering kittens or other animals? Having, an A-frame that's standing in your lobby area, or even a sign on the wall where the cats are being housed, either in a community room or if it's a room of individual cages, about the opportunity to foster, sharing some love, sharing a little bit of space in your house and in your heart. So you can put the things up that your community, when they come into your shelter or rescue, will see, oh, fostering. Well, that's an idea. And it might not be for the next year, but like you'll get some people out of it. They might not be able to do it immediately, but maybe when summertime comes around or in a few months. The community outreach part, two of my favorite areas to recruit people are at real estate offices where realtors make their own hours and they can often go home and check on their kittens in between appointments. They set their own schedules quite a bit. And the other place that I really like, and this was because I was a teacher in my former life, is go to your local schools. And I would suggest going around April, early May, and see if the school would put up a sign in their teacher's lounge, what are you doing this summer? Because the teachers often do take summer vacations. Some will teach summer school and things, but it's a good time to plant that seed of fostering and helping save some lives during the summertime, during the break. And then find out whenever your schools are like, their last day for good. And that last week of school, send another follow-up. You've planted the seed a month earlier, and now you're saying, hey, we've got kittens. They are coming in fast. We really, really would love it. If you could even foster one group of kittens this summer, it's going to save lives that we might not be able to save otherwise. So think about that. Let me see. Feel free to add in. Um, one person is saying, we advertise in our center and social media. This year we reached out to places that have community boards. Excellent ideas. Yeah, those places, sometimes at grocery stores, sometimes at the coffee shops, there's community boards for being able to post things. Retirement complex, tabling at retirement complex, that's a great idea. Um, a lot of times, yeah, they've got a bunch of love to give, a bunch of time to give. Retirement communities are great. Nice, nice ideas. Okay, I need a drink here. All right, moving on. Once we have those fosters, we want to retain them. If we can not have to find too many new ones and have to do training and all of that, it's nice to retain the ones we have. How do we do that? Certainly gratitude. If you even did a survey of your fosters, what uh, what is most impactful? I bet they are going to say simply knowing that we're helping to save lives and that what we do matters. And we as foster coordinators or managers also need to continue to convey that. Um, I cannot say enough thanks to my foster parents um, for being there, for taking the kitten. And it also means that we need to be there for them, especially during those difficult times when they might have lost a kitten to an illness. Not every kitten is going to survive, as we all well know, but being able to support that person uh, and many times they will continue to foster knowing that there's still more kittens who need help and if fosters know, i don't think I don't think making like a beautiful rosy picture of look how much fun fostering is great, da 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 da, da, and it is. But we need to set a realistic picture that sometimes the animals might get sick. Does that mean the foster has to go through that? No, maybe they're the kind of foster who can't deal with the sick animals. That's okay. If the kitten all of a sudden needs round the clock care or more care than that foster was able to provide when that kitten was healthy, um, maybe there are other fosters who do the medical fostering. That's okay. But we need to set a realistic picture for people that sometimes kittens will get sick, that bottle baby kittens do need to be fed around the clock. We can't just feed them during daytime hours. Um, and let them know what they're getting into so there aren't any big surprises. And then if those difficult times do happen, you've already set them up, you've explained that that can happen, and a lot of times it is not any fault of the foster. It's just sometimes things happen with kittens that we don't know. But again, if you're weighing those kittens every day, we're going to catch things early. And if that kitten is not gaining weight, or if that kitten is losing weight, even if there are no other outward signs like, an upper respiratory, runny eyes, runny nose, no diarrhea, like there's no other signs going on, you'll be on top of that. And your veterinarian can start to look further if need be. So that those scales are going to save lives. They're well worth the money. Um, so anyway, let's get off of the difficult times. Advanced and additional training is also what we hear from foster managers and the fosters themselves. They want to, not all of them, some just want the 4 to 8 week olds that are just healthy and they just want to play and see them grow and that's fine. Those are kittens who aren't in the shelter and there's room for someone else. But other fosters might be like, you know what? Yeah, I do want to try maybe doing that upper respiratory. I think I can handle eye drops. Yeah, I think ringworm. I don't have young kids at home. I know ringworm kittens are difficult to have in the shelter for exposure to other animals. And yeah, I could do a lime dip once or twice a week. Sure, I can maybe be that foster. So is there additional types of fostering that your experienced fosters, your current fosters might want to do, and that might make the difference of keeping them as a foster if they're getting just tired or burnt out from one type of kitten situation. And I put additional instead of just advanced because it really in some situations, it's really not advanced training, it's just different training. It's every single kitten needs help. Every single kitten has its individual needs, and so to say that one need is more important or more advanced than the other, I just don't really think is fair. So how can you do those trainings? Well, there's of course in-person trainings. There's online trainings, and again, like on our website, people can go and watch our webinars and do online trainings. And there are other places. 20 years ago when we started, there weren't there weren't any others. We were the only kitten only, focused only on kittens, not dogs and older cats or other animals, specific about kitten education. Since then, we're happy to say that many people have taken our courses, and there are other organizations now that um, have resources also available. So find some training that's available. And having those increased or different responsibilities. And remember, I said you don't have to foster parents to be a foster to be in the foster program. Sometimes maybe someone wants to do something else within the foster program, either in addition to fostering or instead of fostering, and they are very, very valuable volunteers as well. And we'll talk more in just a minute. So here they are, the additional types of foster programs. So this is additional fostering opportunities. And we'll start here. And I'd love to hear what other programs you all might have available for different types of fostering. So field to foster, if you know you've got some really good fosters who know how to age a kitten, who know how to do a basic intake exam, and maybe they're a foster who is a veterinarian or a veterinary technician, and you already are familiar with them, they've been a foster for a while. The field to foster is a situation where your ACOs, with coordination from you or your shelter, can bring those animals that are found in the field directly to a foster parent. And this is especially helpful with bottle baby fosters who maybe can't really afford to, drive around for maybe a lot of shelters are really few and far between, and it might be 40 minutes to get back to the shelter with those animals. And in fact, you have a very experienced foster who's only 5 minutes from where those kittens were found and can take them. So that's the field to foster situation, right to the foster home, not stopping for a check in the shelter, but that foster is an experienced one who can get you, along with the ACO, the information about those animals so you can do the intake remotely, so to speak, and they don't have to make the physical stop at the shelter. Relief or emergency fosters, these are one of my favorite fosters. These guys come through in the pinch. These guys come through when you have had a really long day and it's 10 o'clock at night and you are like trying to put on your coat and finally leave since you've been there since 8 in the morning. And what happens? There's kittens. These are the folks who at a moment's notice will drop what they're doing. They will come and they will foster those animals overnight so that they are cared for during the night. And then the next day, you have the chance to find a more permanent foster for them. These are the ones who, you've got your foster kittens out there in foster care. And unfortunately, that foster parent, had some devastating thing happen in their life, a death in the family. They have to leave pretty quickly. They have to go out of town. These are your emergency relief fosters who will take care of those kittens for a day to 4 days while you have a chance to move them to somewhere else or until, that person's going to be back in 3 days and they can take them back again. Having a really good supply of emergency fosters is huge. And if you have them in different, if you know kind of where they're located, that's also very helpful if if the fosters know each other and they can, go to that person's house to get the kittens coordinated by you, so you know where your animals are all the time. But it takes off a lot. It's not your situation now solely. It's we've got someone who can help you out for a day or two. The temporary nursery, some fosters want to foster, but they just can't. Their life is too busy, but they know every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, from 2 o'clock until 4 o'clock, they can help out in the shelter. Maybe that's if you have a temporary nursery in the shelter where the kittens come in and then during that day or maybe 2 days if you've got overnight staff, those kittens are there until they go to full-time foster. Having those in-house, in-shelter fosters who are reliable can come in and do the temporary nursery situations and you can schedule them ahead of time. The bottle baby only fosters, we've talked about this for years. If you have people who are really, really good with bottle babies and you have a lot of bottle babies, but you don't have a lot of bottle baby fosters, talking with that foster to say, you know what, I know that you just spent 2 weeks caring for these kittens and bottle feeding them and being up at different times and I know you wanna see them through to adoption, but can I talk you into letting these fosters, now that they're eating on their own, go to another foster and you take another litter of bottle babies. And so these are our bottle baby only fosters. And once the kittens are stable and eating on their own, they're able to go to another foster, like I said, from the 4 to 8 week olds who just want to grow and play and everything is great. And that skilled bottle baby foster is able to help the next set of bottle babies. I do at the end of the season like to let those people, if they want to, go through and go ahead and keep them through to adoption if they want, because it is really, really rewarding if you've done it and you've taken these tiny little baby kittens with the bottle for all of these weeks. And now when they're just getting to the stage where they're eating on their own and they're playing and they're extra cute and they're fun, to like not be able to have that enjoyment too. So it is really rewarding to be able to see that. But in the height of kitten season, maybe some of those bottle baby fosters will just do the bottle babies. Medical fosters, so different ages, different foster skills. Um, you can have medical fosters just for bottle babies because that's the whole other thing. You have to take care of feeding them plus do their medical versus older kittens, fosters who want to do medical, but just for older kittens who are eating on their own. Be aware though that they may have to also help with assisted feeding for those kittens who don't necessarily feel up to eating, even though they can eat on their own. So question, really good question, is it stressful for the kittens to move them from one home to another foster home? Is it better to leave them and not stress them out? Actually, there's been studies about kitten stress, that small amounts of kitten stress actually helps them, not that we're gonna stress them out on purpose, but it actually, and with socialization and behavior as well, is if those kittens are able in a nice, safe, controlled environment to be able to meet different people and be in different situations. So actually many of these kittens, I'd almost like to say most, if not all, but I don't have specific numbers for you. They do better or at least really well going to another house. Is there a day that's a little bit like, I don't know, new place? A little bit, but kittens are tend to be really resilient under 8 weeks, 10 weeks old. And that going to another home, especially if they're going to that home with some familiar things like the same food, the same litter, those probiotics that they're gonna be on before they move to that new house, if at all possible, and also for a few days after moving to that new house. So they have some familiar smells. They have, they're not thrown into a new foster home that, like I said, introducing them to all kinds of other animals, a nice controlled situation, where the kittens can get adjusted. They do really well and they tend to socialize really, really well with all kinds of different people. One house might just have the single foster caregiver where another house has a family with kids. And we're able to see how the kittens are able to hear those sounds of children in the house. And ultimately then if they get adopted to a house with children, it's actually going to end up being less stressful for them. So while we can control the environment and foster to a good degree, that's where we want to be able to introduce them to new things. And we have other webinars on behavior and introducing to even like sounds of fire hydrants and pots and pans and barking dogs, and how you can do that in a controlled environment um, with minimal stress to the animals. Uh, and sometimes no stress to the animals, depending on if they're playing at the time or they're eating food, and it's a good association. But I go down a rabbit hole again and I digress too far. But thank you for the question. That's an excellent one. So other kinds of additional fosters, ringworm fosters, if you could find that person who really they're not upset by ringworm, I would not suggest the house that has young children, because again, their immune system isn't fully developed and they have a better chance of catching ringworm than an adult person. As long as, they're not an immunocompromised situation. Finding a ringworm foster who, is willing to do that is huge. It might take a while to find them, but that is amazing when you have them who can just take care of them. Sometimes people want the pregnant or nursing queens, and having the kittens. Be aware that those fosters also should know something about bottle feeding, because if one of those kittens isn't gaining enough weight being with the queen, or if the queen, if there's too many kittens, or if someone's being a hog at the milk bar, so to speak, or that kitten needs to be supplemented, or if the queen herself gets sick and is unable to nurse, all of a sudden those kittens become bottle baby kittens. Are you able to use that queen for a second litter? Possibly. Um, and again, these are things that we don't say do this or do that. We'll give you some ideas about it, and you guys have to make your own decisions within your own organizations and what your policies are going to be. But we will say, please do not overtax the nursing queen. An additional litter, if she's in really good health and she's maintaining her body weight and she's getting all the calories that she needs to be able to continue lactating, okay, but let's not use her all season long. She can start having health problems by having to continue that lactation, and she can start losing important minerals and nutrients from her own body from having to continue that. So one litter maybe if you're in a pinch. This is where it's also really, really important and valuable to continue developing your bottle baby foster program, so that you do have enough bottle baby fosters that you don't have to rely on a nursing queen. The other thing is, if you are going to give kittens to that nursing queen, if at all possible, I almost say for sure, but again, it's going to be dependent on how many kittens you have and how many kittens you're trying to save and where you're at in kitten season. But if it is at all possible to remove her current kittens, so like if she's got a litter of kittens that are already 3.5, 4 weeks old, they're starting to wean, maybe a bottle foster, a weaning foster might have to supplement with the bottle for a week or so. But if you can remove those kittens from her before introducing the new ones, and here's why. Because even a plump, beautiful looking kitten can have been exposed to terrible diseases before arriving at your shelter. And they might look plump and beautiful when you're like, oh, look how beautiful this kitten is. It's a singleton, and let's put her with this litter of kittens and their mama. I can't, the number of times that we hear those stories, and then the heartbreak of not only having that new kitten who was introduced to the litter be very sick or pass, but also the other kittens who were in that litter, because they got exposed to something horrible. So again, if you can minimize that for the kittens. Now the mom, if she's vaccinated, is usually does pretty good despite whatever that new kitten might have come in with. But those kittens who are not yet vaccinated, it's really a risk. And again, you as an organization have to balance and decide for yourselves the risk, the benefit, the time of year, the number of kittens you've got coming through the door. I wish there's a black and white answer, but there's really not. And then socialization fosters, those kittens who are just a little bit on the edge. They were from a colony. They're young enough to, still get some socialization and turn into, fully domesticated, happy. They're socialized completely like other kittens. Um, those are really sometimes a lot of fun, especially for your medical fosters or for your bottle baby fosters who just want a little bit of a break and do something different. Because a lot of times those kittens who come from colonies are really sturdy kittens, and they usually, a lot of them, if it's a well-maintained colony, especially, they'll come in pretty healthy, and manage to stay pretty healthy. But it's that socializing, and that's such a rewarding thing and something different for your other fosters. All right, for time's sake, let's move on. So those other volunteers that I keep talking about, um, that don't have to be foster parents, but are hugely valuable to your session, to your program. And this is where I hope that can actually help you the most. Think about all of the things that you do on a daily basis. Think about the things at the worst of kitten season last year. What was going on? What were you like, "Oh dear God, I just need someone to help me do X, Y, or Z." Or if only this weren't happening, or how can I take care of this when I also have to take care of that? These are where these volunteers really come in. So I loved it. Happened on accident, but since then I have been advocating for a program assistant, foster coordinators out there, foster managers, and the fosters who are currently out there who are also attending this webinar. Are there things that the foster coordinator needs done, or that these foster parents or non-fostering volunteers can do? So what are some of the daily tasks? Okay, well, kittens come in all the time, right? We don't know when they're going to come in. We don't know how many there's going to be. One day we might get 6 litters of kittens in. The other day we might not have anything for 6 more days and have nothing come in. But when those days happen that we have 6 litters of kittens come in, and some have parasites and some are emaciated and some are bottle babies and some are older, and all of these things are going on, we need someone else to help us out. So if there's a volunteer who is going to come on a certain day of the week, and again, this happened accidentally, where there was a volunteer who was there, and that person also happened to be great with kittens and doing all kinds of odd jobs, and they were reliable, and they were there every Tuesday. I knew for 2 hours on Tuesday that person was going to be there, and that person was able to put together the foster care kits. If you're sending supplies home with your fosters, the carrier, the litter box, the litter, the food, the whatever you're sending home, you can have an assistant take care of doing that. And again, if you're tracking, which I strongly encourage you to do, track your supplies, that person can also put it on the Excel spreadsheet or however you're tracking your supplies and who that stuff is going home with. They can take care of the kitten who came in with tons of fleas that you can't even think to send to foster until some of these fleas are off of them. If the kitten is stable enough to be bathed, that person who knows how to bathe a kitten can bathe that kitten. They can make sure that kitten gets fully dried, that that kitten stays warm and does not catch a chill between the time when it is getting bathed and when its foster parent comes to pick them up. Some of the initial screenings of emails or phone calls from questions from fosters, if you have that really experienced foster who can come in, or who you can, you say, "Hey, can you answer Sue's email about this kitten with diarrhea?" Hugely, hugely important, super valuable for your time. And if you don't have those kind of people who can answer those email questions, if you find that you're answering diarrhea questions over and over and over and over, create a little diarrhea answer for yourself, or put something into the handbook for your fosters about what to do about diarrhea. What kinds of things, like I said, are coming up over and over that, oh, it would just be so great if someone took care of this for me. Special cleaning, the people who are really good about detailed cleaning and who understand the risk of unvaccinated young kittens, and they understand how important it is to make sure that that carrier, before it gets used for another kitten, is very well cleaned and disinfected. so that we know there's not any chance of cross-contamination from the last litter of kittens that might have come in on that in that carrier and the new kittens who are going to be in that carrier. So think about any of those kind of tasks that these additional volunteers might be able to do. Also, if recruiting is like the bane of your existence, trying to find new fosters all the time, can you have a volunteer just focus on recruiting, a focus on making those adorable foster signs to get people interested in fostering, going to the community places where they have those bulletin boards, tabling at those retirement communities whose like their sole focus, or at least one of their main focuses, is to find new foster parents for you. And maybe they are even helping with the training. Um, to that point, event coordinators, people who can help you. Okay, you've got new fosters, you need to do a training. Or maybe you have a very active foster group who does like to get together for pizza. Maybe somebody else can help like create that event, plan that event, do the emails to the fosters to come and attend the event. Similarly with recognition, certainly an email from you as a foster manager is really important. It's nice if occasionally you can send a handwritten note, especially for your fosters who are a little bit older. They really appreciate the handwritten notes that come in the mail. And there are some shelters that they'll have a person, a volunteer who gets the pictures of the current fosters or the ones who just got adopted, and there's a bulletin board. Maybe it's in back where the shelter staff is, maybe it's in a room where your foster parents come or your other volunteers come, maybe it's in the lobby of the shelter, recognizing or doing little pictures of the kittens who've been adopted, or some fosters don't want any public recognition. I respect that, but others like to hear, thanks to, here's Sue's fosters, who were adopted last month, or this during this past month, things like that. Um, for the ones who are ready for adoption, do you have are there special adoption events? Is there a volunteer who can help with those things? Or, for example, when kittens are coming back. Is there a volunteer who can help, you know, bring those kittens back in from the foster, check them back into the shelter, or put them in their new space for adoption? Or maybe making those medical appointments. Maybe there's someone who can help. Whatever it is that you're like, gosh, if only I can get this off my plate, see if you can't find a foster or a volunteer rather to help get that off your plate. Okay, what do you need? What are you sending home? Basic supplies. We have other webinars that we talk about supplies, but here are some basic things. Notice I have scales at the top. This is the most important thing. Like I said, we have to have kittens being weighed daily, and even the best fosters who are like, oh, I'll pick up a scale, even if a couple days goes by before they are able to go to the store and get a scale or have something delivered, sometimes 2 or 3 days is too long, and that kitten might have been losing weight for those 2 or 3 days. Um, so if you can at all get those scales in your budget, donations, somehow get scales for every person who has fosters under 8 weeks of old at home to be weighing those kittens every day. And then when they come back to the shelter, they should be weighed every day or at least a couple times a week while they're on the adoption floor waiting, because and especially if there's more than 2 or 3 kittens in a cage, or depending if it's a big cage or a community room, we don't know if one kitten is eating all the food and the other kitten isn't getting any. It's really important to continue weighing them even when they come back. So things that you're going to send home, are you sending home cages or carriers, formula, bedding, all of these things you can take a look at. um, Medical, make sure that the rules and guidelines for your fosters about making general appointments, emergency care, how do they have to go about that? Do they have to check first with medical care? Any of these things that you're sending home, include, if you're including them, great. The timeline with each foster under record keeping, I think it's really important to have a foster agreement for each set of kittens that goes out. You know their AO number if you're using Chameleon, the actual kitten, the name, all the stuff that we know about that kitten, sex, the medical that's been done, anything that's been happening, and that goes with the foster and stays with the kitten. And if the foster has to go to overnight emergency, they have that information. Here's when this kitten's been vaccinated, here's the medications it's had for an upper respiratory. That information is with the foster and with that kitten, and it travels with the kitten all the time. And pick a favorite color folder that you like. And at the one of the shelters I was at, it was a blue folder. That blue folder was with that kitten all the time. If the foster brought the kitten in for a health check at the shelter, if they had to go somewhere else for medical, all of that information is right there with the kitten all the time. Templates for kitten bios, you can have a lot of fun with that. That's a whole other session. We have other things. Essential basic kitten care. I don't want to spend time on this. Plus, we're running out of time. We have all kinds of webinars for bottle babies, for older kittens, for basic care, for medical care, for panleukopenia, for fading kitten syndrome, for all kinds of things, diarrhea. So please feel free to go to our e-learning center on that. Um, of course, again, the daily basic care, kittens have to be weighed daily. They have to be in a clean environment. The fosters have to clean daily. We can't let litter boxes go. The kittens have to be clean and their environment has to be clean. I encourage you to have your foster caregivers do an initial exam on every foster they take in. Your veterinarian may have just done an exam, and that is great. And the foster comes 5 hours later, literally, depending on the situation, depending on the age of the kitten, sometimes something that was not visible 5 hours earlier becomes visible. And it's the responsibility of that foster parent to know kind of what the baseline is. They need to familiarize themselves with the kitten that they take home so that the next morning, when something new presents itself, like a goopy eye, they will have known that 12 hours earlier there was not a goopy eye, but now there is, and it can be charted accurately. It's really important that fosters become very familiar with who their kittens are and what their condition is so they can know if things are changing. Food and litter transitions, we talk about them more in other webinars, making sure that they are gradual, and it's really nice to send the same food and the same type of litter with anytime that kitten moves. Um, I talked about dedicated space when they come back. Think about that, having one or two that you as a foster program manager know I have got this space available and I know I can bring that next set of kittens in. Make sure medical is up to date. We know and the adopters know what's been done and what still needs to be done, including the due dates. The kittens' records, their bios, their photos, videos are great. You can put them on you can put them somewhere and have a QR code that adopters can look at a video, or potential adopters. I'm going to talk a whole lot more about planning for successful adoptions for the people and the pets at this year's Virginia Federation of Humane Societies conference. How many people are signed up already? It's going to be a great conference, and I will have a whole lot of information about preparing pets for adoption success at that conference. I would encourage you, for time's sake, please feel free to go to our website if you've not yet seen it, if you've not yet joined our webinars. Go to the e-learning center for on-demand learning. Again, there are a whole bunch of articles on a whole bunch of kitten topics that you can download and print out. The e-learning center is all free with a range of topics. We add new stuff usually every month. We also do these conferences that I told you about in the beginning, the online kitten conference, that's with Community Cats Podcast. It's online, June 7th and 8th. Our veterinary conference for the veterinary community, which also will include continuing education credits for the veterinary community on October 19th. That is also online. There is a small fee for both of those. Right now, the online kitten conference has the early bird registration going on at $50. Otherwise, it'll go up to $75. Sign up for emails if you like. Check our National Kitten Coalition event calendar. or follow us on social media. We also post there when we're doing things. You can contact us at info@kittencoalition.org. I could stay to answer a few more questions that have come in on the in the chat box. My email, if you want to email me personally, instead of info@kittencoalition.org, it's going to be my first name, Rosemarie at kittencoalition.org. In fact, I can cut and paste this real quick. Copy, paste. There is my personal email address. If there was something specific that you wanted to follow up about. Um, and there's where we're at. Made it with a few minutes left. Like I said, I'll stay and answer a few questions. And thank you again for being here. Thank you to the Virginia Federation. I am thrilled to be a board member, and we want to be able to provide you with educational opportunities that are going to make your jobs easier and are ultimately going to help more animals. So thank you again for being here. This is my cat Wobbles. She was a panleukopenia survivor. And there was a question that came in about bringing kittens to adoption events. Is it recommended? Um, again, is to the point that you can control things and not have a bunch of people just coming to pet the cats and kittens who are not interested in adopting. I strongly, strongly would recommend that any animals you bring to adoption events are fully vaccinated. Excuse me, let me get a drink. That they are fully vaccinated. And that doesn't mean vaccinating them the day before the adoption event. There's been too many situations that we continue to hear about. Well, I vaccinated them, but maybe they only had one vaccine and they were exposed to something in an adoption event, especially if it's an adoption event that's more public or that there are multiple shelters or rescues or foster homes coming to, where it's not all like the same kittens from all the same environment. The risk of them becoming possibly infected with something like the scary ones, panleukopenia, make sure that they are fully vaccinated. We have other webinars where we talk about vaccine schedules, and that they've had those vaccines in them at least for 2 or 3 days before you decide to take them to an event, to an adoption event where they possibly can be exposed to something. It does take a little bit of time, even for the live vaccines to reach their optimum. Um, and yeah, so that's my recommendation on that. Thank you all. You're all being so sweet. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate the thanks, and thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do to help animals, and especially to help kittens. And I hope we'll see you at the Virginia Federation Conference coming up soon, and at some National Kitten Coalition events. Have a great night, everyone.